Do we have questions from the would-be Oulipians? Yeah. You there in the Oulipian shirt.
Over here.
Oh yeah, I got one.
Sir.
I'll help.
Christian book has some other stuff that's pretty funny, like a sound poem, where he will read a score and he intones based off of the way the score looks, and it looks very similar to a piece composed by Penderecki. I forget what the exact title is, but it has something to do with the souls that died in Hiroshima.
Oh yeah, threaded me to the...
Yeah, exactly. So it's and the concept behind what Book is doing, and I saw him perform one of these, and it was crazy. I think it's definitely on the weirder side, weirder than and other stuff. Is he's reading it, he's intoning, his voice is all over the place, he's doing crazy stuff, and you see a very similar effect when you listen to the Threnody, because what Penderecki's done is just created kind of these visual arcs on the page that you can trail and go up and down with, and the violin, like, it's mostly for string, and they're allowed to kind of like intone and read the scores they see fit. So pitch gets thrown out the window, a bunch of other things get thrown out the window. All they're doing is going against this contour line, which is oddly similar to what Book is doing. So I think that opens up an interesting thread, which is, how does like serial music fit into this? And you think of somebody like John Cage, you think of the experiments he did. And I think that's a very cool point of overlap, and I'd be curious to hear what you guys think of that.
There's more chances, huh?
I thought that maybe I thought there was an attempt at something along the lines of a serialist Oulipo work, where each letter is used once until they're all exhausted and they start over again.
Yeah, that is a form called a pangram. A pangram is a text with all the letters of the alphabet, and the idea is to write as short a text as possible. And so there are forms or experiments in the Oulipo that could be said to have certain things in common with serialism. But what I was thinking about while you were talking about that was more the Oulipo, which is basically like the Oulipo but for music. So if the Li in Oulipo is literature, then there are all these other something else pos. And there's, as one of you was saying, there's an Oulipo for music. There are a few of those actually. There's the Oubapo, which is cartooning. There's the Ousipo, which is constrained cinematography. There's the Upampo, which is painting. Ufopo is photography. So they're like...
Is there one for cooking?
Yeah, there is. It's called the Oulipo. It lasted for like a couple of years. Harry Matthews and another member of the Oulipo started it, and
But then they just trademarked that as Iron Chef. And I would have joined that.
There's one chapter in the Sinking of the Otterdeck Stadium, which Scott just mentioned, that talks about like the narrator is writing about this evening. He's like completely hungover and he's talking about what he did last night, and he had a friend over and they were wasted, and they decided to like have this really lofty conceptual like cooking exploit. They were like, we must only use solids, and again, it's not worth trying to describe, but that is very Euclidean.
Can I ask you something about just this, I guess, tiny bit selfish, I guess, but so many writers I know use constraints that, like, okay, so you just described this conceptual cooking project. I mean, I know there's C.A. Conrad as an author who lives in Philadelphia, he's a poet. He does a lot of somatic exercises, he calls them. So let's say he'll only eat red foods for 3 days, and then he'll write based on that or whatever. And I just wonder what I mean, he writes this amazing, he has a new book about all these somatic exercises. I wonder how, and then there's other many poets who use constraint-based things and then move off of them. What do you think the Oulipo attitude would be? Would it be sort of like, that's just not what we do, or good for you, or fuck off, or just nothing, or is there any caring about that sort of maybe like not orthodox Oulipo activity, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so on one hand, there is some like procedural constraint stuff in the Oulipo. That sort of that C.A. Conrad stuff, I think is not. I don't know that there's an objective reason that wouldn't play in the Oulipo, that he couldn't bring that to an Oulipo meeting and say, here's what I did, and they would immediately offer him membership. But the attitude is pretty much, you know, anyone's, like my attitude, or, you know, it's just a consensus, like, oh, that's really rad, that's cool that you're doing that. And if it's so cool that the Oulipo thinks that person has something to offer to the idea of potential literature, then maybe they'll invite him or her to a meeting and sort of have him or her present their work. Or,
It's a bit of a union, you pay your dues as well, you can just let out you do your thing, and then...
It's like open source, isn't it?
Yeah. And if not, then, you know, there's no, maybe individually somebody will resent it, but there's no kind of collective recrimination, and there's no fuck you about it.
They're not like the surrealists who were constantly looking for opportunities to execute.
Yeah, and that's we were talking earlier about how the Oulipo is sort of built into its founding charter was that it was sort of anti-surrealist, conceptually because using chance as a generative device is very different from using calculation as a generative device, but also Queneau, who was one of the founders of the Oulipo, was a surrealist briefly in the 20s, and just had a big falling out with them based largely on that sort of thing, that they were really overly political about everything, and, you know, like you said, sort of a volatile group, and Queneau wanted to found something that wasn't like that.